Hi and welcome to our latest edition of Get in the Habit with myself, David Finch, my co-host, Sue Allsworth, and the very lovely Claire Kehily. Did I say it right, Claire?
Nearly, it's Claire Kehily.
Kehily, oh right, okay.
Hello.
I'm just looking at your name and thinking I must be Kehily. But
It's a common one, yeah. It's silent H. But
silent H, yeah. All right then. Yeah.
Hi,
Oh, that's
everyone.
a great way. Off to a good start, ain't we?
That's all right. That's all right. It's the luck of the Irish for you.
Yeah. Oh dear. The Irish has got lots of like Siobhan. I mean, you spell Siobhan and it's like, how'd you say that? You know, it's got B in the middle. You know,
you look at it and you think, and you know, when I spell my name out to people, so many people when they spell it back, they move the L and the I because it just flows better for them.
Yeah,
I know they're going to do it or pop another E in somewhere. But yeah, my late father-in-law was originally from Dunleary, just south of Dublin. So yeah, his family were from there. So
marvellous. Well, welcome along today to Get in the Habit podcast with myself and Sue. Now, I know that you know Sue, and she knows all about you, but I don't really know about you at all. So tell me and our listeners and viewers about you.
Well, obviously, my name's Claire Kehily, and amongst other things, I'm a funeral celebrant. So I've done different things over the years. I've come to it from sort of 2 decades in health and social care. So working very closely with people, and that included palliative care at times as well. So all aspects of care, and you know, the elderly, people with disabilities, people with learning disabilities. So I've worked with all sorts of people, and I was also, and I still am for another couple of months, a registrar, a celebrant with the local county council for marriages as well. So it was something that I did to start with, and then I decided that I wanted a complete change. And I felt called, as if you like, or I felt that my strengths and my future lay in burying people, which sounds a very odd thing to do. But I thought it was something that I could do working with the families. Bearing in mind, I'd already worked with a lot of families in difficult situations. And I just thought, this is what I am called to do, to celebrate the rites of passage of people's lives with them in a friendly, a warm, and not irreverent, but not so somber way. I've been to some funerals and just thought, who are they talking about? This bears no resemblance to the person I knew. And then the final thing was my late father-in-law. He died nearly 2 years ago. And I was sat with him because we knew he was going to pass. And so we'd had all these conversations, which is so important to have the conversations if you can. And I think that's one of the habits that people do need to get into. And he sat there and he said to me, I'm dying, aren't I? Or, you know, about him dying, and because he'd got terminal cancer. So we all knew he was dying, including him. And I said, yes, Ben, yeah, you are. And I said, how do you feel? And he went, well, I've had a really good life. He said, I've done all the things I wanted to do. I had a brilliant job. I loved my job. I loved my wife. I loved my kids. Can't wait to see Wendy, my mum-in-law, because she'd already passed. And he said, so, yeah, I've had a good life. And I went home and I thought, if I was going tonight, would I say that? Would I be that death positive? And I thought, for most of it, I would. But career-wise, I'd got to a point where I was thinking, got to go to work again. I wasn't enjoying it. And I thought, it's time. That is my universe's kick up the backside to say, change. So I did. So I handed my notice in, phoned my husband, and went, I've handed my notice in. He's like, what? And what are you going to do? I don't know. Don't worry. It'll all work out. And it did. That's when I started working at the shelter as well. And so I trained as a funeral celebrant.
Yeah.
So that's my little journey of how I got here. It's not normal. I mean, people say, were you a priest or a vicar or something? I'm like, no way. No, I'm not an ordained minister. I mean, I've got a belief and a spirituality, but no, I'm not an ordained minister of faith or anything like that. So
that is amazing. And Claire, this brings up so many questions I want to ask you.
I'm just going to sit here and look pretty today. So if you want to see me, if you're on the podcast, nip over to YouTube. I am still here. I'm looking gorgeous. But you crack on. I know this is such, to me, it's a really, exciting is the wrong word, but I do. I love this conversation, this topic, because it's a good habit to get into the habit of talking about death,
Mm.
because it is
It is,
guaranteed.
and also, I mean,
Yeah, it
Sue's
is.
shared my journey with me, because I was working closely with Sue, doing one of your journal journey books, wasn't I? And, you know, saying what I wanted to do. And I struggled hugely with imposter syndrome, thinking that's the one, thinking I can't. Sue's a personal friend, you know.
Yeah.
I've known Sue for about 4 years, 4 or 5 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And we've shared a few adventures together, haven't we?
Yeah.
and you know, and sort of, it was, as well as the habits of talking about of death, and we'll come to that in a minute, but the habit of change as well, which death is ultimately a change, is you have to see things don't happen by chance. Very rarely does a door suddenly open, you go, oh, I'll try that. You have to look for that door. You have to go, what is it I want? You have to sit down, look at what you want, and think, how am I going to do this? How is this going to happen? And so, yeah, so Sue knows quite a lot about my journey.
Yeah.
It was the deservability section in the journal journey with creativity. I don't think that really blew your helped you sort of, I suppose, put that cherry on top of the cake of figuring out what it was that you wanted to do, because I really questioned you on looking at not just feeling as if you deserve, but actually what does deservability mean.
Definitely. And it was the, like I said, fighting the imposter syndrome that was like, who are you to stand up and say we're all gathered here, and, you know, people are going to go, who's she? She's not. But actually, I'm Claire, and, you know, I'm warm and friendly. I mean, I think Sue will agree with that. And, you know, but, you know, the people, I mean, for example, not blowing my own trumpet, but I had an email from somebody who I'm working with at the moment for their mum's funeral, saying how much they enjoyed the meeting with me. I mean, it was over the phone, to talk about planning her funeral, because it was, they'd laughed and they'd spoken about their memories. It wasn't just, they said it was far less traumatic than ones they've done before. And I thought, I'll take that as a compliment, that I've got the attitude right for that person. Obviously, it alters for different people, because some people are in completely different situations, you know. But so, yes, so back to your questions, David.
Yeah. No, that's okay. Yeah, it's okay. I'll just jot down a few.
That's why I'm going to now shut up.
Okay, so I've got so many running through my head, and of course we've got a time scale to work to, but I really want to get some more information from you, and to get to really sort of dive a bit deeper. Now, first and foremost, today you come across as really kind of light and bubbly, happy-go-lucky, kind of, you know, happy Claire. All right.
Yep.
So I've been to not many funerals, but I've been to a few, all right, in my life. And I think as you get older, you go to more funerals, which is pretty sad, you know. And I can, like you said earlier on, where you stand there and somebody at the front is saying about this person, and you think, who are they talking about? Because they're not talking about the person I know. Yeah. So that really resonates with me. So how do you get to know, if you don't know them, you know, like, say it was my funeral, me and you don't know each other, do we? No. So if it was my funeral, how would you get to know what to say? Who do you talk to, and how do you put that together?
Well, we organise what we call what's known as a family meeting. So that will be with, obviously in a lesser strict COVID situation, that is a meeting at someone's house where everybody gets together. So I've done those, and I've also done Zooms, and I've done phone calls, whatever's appropriate for the person. One couple I'm working with at the moment are in Somerset, but their brother and brother-in-law is here.
Right.
So that was a phone call, and so you meet with the family to just discuss what it is they want. And I've got a list of questions I asked, and it's the questions based on when I did my training. So I did my training with OBOD, which is the Order of Bards, Ovids and Druids, and their School of Celebrity. So I did my training with them, because that fits in more with my spirituality rather than some of these expensive $2,000 training courses. And I thought, no, I'm not paying. I'm not doing that. And I couldn't afford it. But I've tweaked it so that it fits how I want to ask. So we'll be sat there or talking, and we'll go through first, introduce myself and chat to them, see who they are. So it's friends and family, whoever they want to be included. And then I'll say always sort of start with the horrible questions, like, you know, the where, when, what exactly is it you want? And then I like to go back to when they were young and ask about where they were born. And I've got all these questions and I pick up on quite often people will suddenly start telling you a story. Oh, do you remember when Mum did this? Or, you know, oh, where was that? Remember that dog bit Dad? What was that about? And I'll say, oh, what was that? And I'll ask them, because one memory will lead to another. Oh, no, that's when we were in Dorset. Was that the holiday when we all had that stick of rock and Dad broke his tooth? No, that's when we were in Blackpool. And that will lead to another one, because they're not trying to tell you that story. Because for example, one of the funerals I've got next week is a very traditional funeral where people are wearing black, and it's got religious bits in it, religious elements. It's got the Lord's Prayer and a religious committal. Fine. Another one is, it's still got religious elements, but it's much more light-hearted than the other one, because the lady lived a long life, and her daughters came up with some wonderful memories. And I like to do, and I do try and encourage people to have a celebration of life, rather than if people want a funeral, I'll do them a funeral, don't get me wrong, but I gauge how they want it done, just through talking to them, because especially when people are bereaved, they want to talk. A lot of the time they want to talk, so they will come out with different things, and they'll tell you stories, and they go, oh, I've forgotten about that. So it's a celebration of their life, and I encourage them to give me some funny memories, some good memories. Sometimes they're sad memories, you know, if things have happened along the way. But I put that all together, and they'll always read it first. But quite often one memory will trigger another, and I'll ask them perhaps some questions that are, you know, I'll say to them, well, what were their spiritual beliefs? You know, what did they have a favourite author? You know, you pick hints up, and I suppose that's from sort of 20 years of doing health and social care, and picking up little clues that somebody goes, yeah, no, I'm fine, and you think, no, you're not, I know you're not. And just picking up those little, you know, the odd comment that you think there's something else there. And as you can tell, I got off on a tangent a bit, and
that's fine.
It's like finding the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle.
It's a patchwork quilt.
To put together and create a story. And you are the storyteller and the story writer and the storyteller in that moment. And I know you do it with grace, with humour if need be. You know,
when appropriate.
With honouring their people's, as you say, I know your beliefs and your spirituality, but that doesn't come into what you do. It is very much obviously client focused, isn't it?
It's client, and it is, like you say, it's a puzzle piece. And I had one funeral where it was a youngish lady, and she'd been estranged from her brothers, who are the only family left here. She'd got family in New Zealand, but she hadn't seen them for a long time. And lots of people knew her in different places. She'd lived a very frantic life in a lot of ways, a very difficult and complex life. And it was really difficult to piece it all together. So I, rather than struggle and sort of meet brick wall after brick wall, I asked about 4 or 5 people to write their memories, and I read them out, and I actually said in my opening words, you know, that it was really difficult to capture the spirit of this particular lady. And I said, so I've got you to tell me your story of her. And actually that was probably one of the best funerals I've ever delivered, because it was their words. It was and some of the stories were quite, you know, there was cheeky and naughty stories, but it fitted for her. It fitted her life, and I somehow managed to blend them together. And I do write a lot, and I do like writing. So, and it is one of my gifts. There you go, Sue. It's my deservability. But it is writing and pulling things.
What a difference a year makes.
but it is something I know that I am good at, and I can pick the elements out of things and put them together. And because no person is one character, we're all multifaceted, and I think that's when you can't pin somebody down in black and white, you have to let them come out of the paper. The other thing I do, which sounds a little bit woohoo, is I have on YouTube I have a music playlist, and I put all the funeral songs that everybody uses on there. So I've got this quite macabre list of everybody's funeral music, but I play the music that they're having, because quite often that gives me an idea of who they are. It gives it a 3D thing. That's very visual, but and I like them to send me a photo so that I can, and the first thing, if you go to someone's house, is they will show you a photo of their loved one, and that's really helpful because you can see a little bit of that person from it. So I've got their music, their picture, their memories, and build them up from there. It's a long answer to a short question, David, sorry.
No, it's a brilliant answer.
The music part I think is brilliant, because I know we've spoken about what songs and that my parents would want, and everything. And my dad, for the final one of everyone leaving, is Georgie Fame, Get Away.
Yeah.
Right. So that gives you a little hint into a bit of humour of him. Even just, you know, if you didn't know my dad, you'd kind of think, well, he's got a little bit of, he likes jazz, he likes a bit of humour. So they're really quite insightful, actually, the songs. And
they are.
The words, you're kind of almost, if they've connected with the words with that song, you're sort of listening to a bit of where they've been in life as well, haven't you? So it's beautiful.
Claire, let me ask you about you and how you deal with your emotions, because if I put myself in your seat and did your job, I would find it really difficult to stay, emotionally detached as such, if that makes sense. You know, that because let's be honest, going to a funeral is an emotional event for lots of people, whether that's, whoever you are involved, whether you're friend, family, whatever, So how do you deal with your emotions, and what habits have you had around that in the past, perhaps?
Well, obviously, as much as it's lighthearted, and I always, if people were happy to use humour, and I do try and put a bit of humour into this if it's appropriate, and some people don't want it, and that's fine. But if they're starting to tell me funny stories, I'll use them, because that actually helps with the bubble of emotion that's building up with the congregation, the guests, the mourners, because obviously they've got this, and then there'll be a funny story, and that'll release a bit, and it'll help them, to my mind, it helps them get through it. It's quite what's the word, therapeutic for them to be able to laugh and let some of that out. And when everybody's laughing at a funeral, I think that's a beautiful sound. So I think, and obviously not everybody wants that. Some people aren't in the place for that, or some people weren't funny,
What about your emotions, though?
About yours,
So what I meant was, although I do all that, I am quite professional, and I look at it as a job because I have to. I look at it as, I'm going to do this, and I've got to be the calm person that knows what's going on, that is leading these people who are having probably one of the worst moments of their lives. So I do have a little prayer I do before I start working with a family, before I go to a funeral, and I always make sure that I am grounded and centered and ready. I can't just rush in and do it. I have to come and sit down and prepare. And like I said, I've got spiritual beliefs, and I sit and have a chat with my spiritual deities and whatnot, and get myself into the right place. And for example, somebody asked me to do one the other week, and I said, I'm not going to have time, and I'm not going to rush it, because I can't do it like that. I have to be able to sit calm and prepare myself. So that will be, make sure, for example, I've had my breakfast, I've had my cup of tea before I sit down, I've maybe meditated a little, and all those sorts of things. But also it's being able to, I suppose, where I've worked in health and social care, you kind of look at it from the inside, from the outside in sometimes. And I have to sort of, then the other thing I do is I say goodbye to them afterwards. I have a tiny little ceremony with myself to thank them for letting me work with them, which sounds a little bit, but then that puts closure on it for me. The only one did stay with me, and I really struggled to, I kept thinking about, and that was the young lady who'd left, that I said about, where I'd got the people to come up and talk about her, or read their things out. And she's the only one that really stayed with me in my head, that troubled me a little. So from time to time they will trouble me, and funnily enough, I can't say too much, but it transpired later that there's police involvement in that, and I knew that something was afoot there, which is quite intuitive. Normally with the funerals, I can see, once the family, I've done my job and the family have gone off, I can say goodbye. And I always, at the end of the thing, I always bow to the to the coffin, and you know, because it's a respect thing of you do that anyway when you go. But that's my point. I whisper goodbye then, and that's me saying goodbye to them.
Yeah.
I did have a close friend's son died just recently. He was 13, he had a brain tumor, and my friend's like my age, and that was emotional. But had I not been doing the service, I would have been a mourner. So when it was they played a particular song that upsets me anyway, because it reminds me of a family member, and the tears came, and I thought, I'm going to let them come on this occasion, because my grief is genuine for that lad, because I knew him and loved him. I knew him since he was a little 8-year-old boy.
Yeah.
And so then I let them come. Not, you know, it wasn't, but there were tears, and I you know, I thought, no, I'm going to let, you know, I mean, my friend couldn't help but see. She was 6 feet away from me. She knew I was crying, and we'd laughed and cried together when we'd done the family meeting. So that's the closest one I've done to me, and that was hard, keeping it together. But equally, no, because she asked me to do it while her son was still alive, because she knew he was terminally ill.
Right.
And so I knew it was coming. So and I knew how much it meant to her to have me doing it, that was someone that knew him and loved him. And it was, I think for me personally, you know, when somebody died, you let me know if I can do anything, and there is nothing you can do. You can be the shoulder to cry on, you can maybe make them a shepherd's pie or do them a bit of shopping. There's nothing you can do. You can't change anything. And I think for my friend Sarah in particular, the fact that I was able to do something big in a way to help her with this process of her son dying and grieving meant a lot to me, that gave me the strength to do it.
Oh yeah. I've heard the term a good death, and I think actually, you know, people talk about a good death, if that makes sense, you know, but I also think that it goes the next step is actually a good funeral, a good goodbye, you know, and I don't really like the word funeral. Actually, I think celebration of life, like you said earlier on, celebration of someone's life is so much better as a term to use, you know. Let me just ask, because I know we're pressed for time, because you've got another appointment, and you know you'll need to get off.
Sorry,
no, that's okay. Let me ask you one last question around music, because I think and around preparing for a celebration of your life. So if I knew someone who was terminally ill, or I was terminally ill, or whatever, what advice would you have for me to prepare maybe my music, what I want to say? Because like you said earlier, and I've been to funerals like it before, where they didn't really know that person. And, you know, I know when my dad died, my mum died suddenly, so we didn't really get that conversation. But when my dad died, me and him had a bit of a chat. But, you know, it was very much around, you know, what kind of funeral he wanted and so on, you know, and that was it. But what advice would you give to people now who maybe want to prepare, you know, they want to prepare themselves? So could I come up with a playlist? Could I come up with some words, some stories that I can pass on to someone to say, look, when I die, do that?
Before Claire goes in, I would say, Dave, don't wait until someone's terminally ill.
Yeah.
We've already had, I know Claire's going to say this anyway, but we have already had these conversations in our house, and no one's ill.
Yeah.
They're still quite young. So I would say my one thing would be to say, make it a habit to talk about death as soon as you can, because it does help, doesn't it, Claire? Sorry, I'll shut up again.
That's all right. No, that's all right. No, you're right.
Good habit.
It does. It is. You know, I think people, when you're younger, you go through this stage where you're immortal, sort of your late teens and 20s, you're immortal, you're going to live for it, unless you're impacted closely by death, unless somebody who's not expected to dies around you. You know, grandparents shuffle off, you know, great aunties shuffle off.
Health issues.
Pets die, unless somebody is ill or somebody dies suddenly, that you suddenly lose a parent when you're 12 or something. It's something that happens later on and you don't think about it. I think as you get older, you naturally start to go, And one of my favorite quotes is by a Japanese writer called Haruki Murakami, and it's, death is not the opposite of life, it's a part of it. And I think that is a that's something that comes with age, that you start to think, actually, it's going to happen. But having conversations with children about, and we always had pets as children, so that we understood what death was, and my children always had pets, so they would understand what it was. But these conversations, most people will talk about it if you talk to them, and you can't march up to your mum, dad, or your sibling and go, so when you die, what do you want? But you could, a way to approach it is quite often, and the way that's been suggested by lots of things I've read and I've been involved in, is talking about a funeral afterwards and saying, how did you think Uncle Bob's funeral went? That was quite nice. I'd quite like that. Would you have liked that at yours, kind of thing? So that you're not saying you're dying, what do you want? But having those conversations and talking about funerals and relatives in the past brings that up. I mean, there is an organisation called Death Cafe, and was started by a gentleman called John Underwood in London about 20 years ago. Now, he's unfortunately died terminally ill or anything. He died suddenly, but he started promoting the death conversation, and there are death cafes going around. I do.
You have one locally, yeah.
And I do them as well. And just asking questions and thinking about it. And like Sue said, having those conversations ahead of when you've got the pressure of a terminal illness or an impending death. Because, I mean, for example, I possibly because of my work, people talk to me about death all the time. And I'm quite happy to talk about it to people as well. And my poor parents have, I didn't nag them, but mum said, I must write a list of things that I'd quite like. And she wrote me this massive page of A4 with poems. It's a poem she quite likes, which is Dust If You Must. And she's like, I don't mind where I go, sort of thing. And Dad's at the bottom likes the music from Last of Summer Wine. That's it. That's all that's all my dad's given me. And she had to laugh. There's her long list and Dad's little bit at the bottom of it. But I think it's having regular conversations and touching in on your emotions around it when death's brought up on the telly. When, for example, when Queen Elizabeth, obviously we all saw the pictures of her in Westminster Abbey on her own, Prince Philip, but there was also an article, and it was, I can't remember where it was, but they'd had a pact. They'd obviously discussed one of them would go. I mean, they were in their 90s, and it was the other one would continue to laugh. They promised each other that they would continue to laugh. Now, she's 95. She knows that it's not going to be long before she meets him, with all the will in the world. I'm not wishing it on her, bless her heart, but at 95, she's not talking 20 years before she gets to meet him. But it is definitely having those conversations and allowing time for those emotions to come up. And when something happens, you're not all then running around trying to work out what to do, because I've noticed that from the family meetings. You can tell who's talked about it before, because they go, well, Mum would like this, or let's get this one for Mum. This was Mum's favourite song. So have those conversations about your favourite songs. And I've got these, I bought them from is it Marie Curie, and they're a set of playing cards, and they're really handy. And they've got, I don't know if you can see, for example, they've got a question. This one says, what's the most daring thing you've ever done? So they're a set of playing cards, but they've also got questions on. So while you're playing Snap or Rummy or whatever, Whist, you can say to somebody, who would you like to play the story of your life? And things like that. And, this one, complete the sentence. It might surprise you to learn this, but I once, and then, so
you can get books as well, can't you, Claire? I know that you sit through with your grandparents or your parents, so that it's like a memory book.
I was just going to say about them.
It's a really good idea. I never knew that, because that's a really great idea to open up that conversation. Really good.
There's also, if you go lots of places, I'm in the process of creating some at the moment for my website that my marvelous son is building, but there's lots of lists that you can find that say what to do when I die, and there are books called When I'm No Longer Here, that kind of thing, that you put in there what's important to you, because obviously everyone's got a life story, and there are some things that you're really proud that you achieved.
Yeah.
You know, and it might not be the degree, it might not be the 2-1 degree, it might be that you passed your driving test after 10 times. Do you know, it might be, you know, and it took me a while to pass mine, and I was so chuffed. Do you know what I mean? But it, you know, but there are books that you can write in ahead of time, you can prepare yourself. And there's a lovely lady called Kay, and I think you introduced me to her, Sue, didn't you? And she writes life stories and has less classes doing life stories. And working from maybe a photograph or just a snippet of a memory, you'll write about that and why the photograph was important, what you were doing. So you get the idea of, and that you can capture bits of your life. So you can show your son, your daughter, your sister these and go, oh, I did this. Yeah, I remember that. So it's, and those sorts of things do promote conversation about, you know, it's going to happen and what's going to happen. And it, you know, people, once you realize it's not something that you can avoid and look at it head on, but sometimes it does take a funeral or it does take a close death to realize, actually, I do need to address that. But it is so much easier if you look at it, how would you want your loved ones to be dealing with it once you're not here? What would you want them to know? What would you want? Because they're the ones that are going to have to deal with it.
I've got a death box. My mum, as you know, Claire, my mum's prepared already a death box for me, which is actually gone into death boxes, I think, rather than singular. But it's got all paper, everything that I will, in theory, need there. I know that sort of power of attorney and all of that is already in place at the solicitors, ready, so that if I have to action it, I've been a carer and done palliative care, as Claire knows, and you know, Dave. And I've seen one family who literally left it too late almost, and it was not easy to do it. So as much as it sounds depressing, at the end of the day, you know, I'm an only child. Biggest fear of my life is losing my parents, and I'll be the first to admit that.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'll swallow that emotion right down that I'm feeling in my throat right now. But I also know it's going to happen. So there's no point in me being an ostrich and sticking my head in the sand. I've already suffered anticipatory grief and different things. But we talk about it. I know what they want, what they don't want. And it does, and we almost joke about it sometimes, to be quite honest. It's sort of like, you know, I'm gonna, you know, we stand up to cancer and take the piss out of cancer because we're standing up to it, because we're going to own it with humor. And so I'm going to own death with humor, you know, sort of thing. But it's such an important, from being a carer myself and seeing families go through things. You know, once that person's died, they've died, but the family are left with so much. And it is the amount that you can organise prior as best as you can. I think it does. Grief's bad enough without a load of chaos around you, isn't it? Let's face it. That's where
I mean, there was Margareta Magnusson. She wrote the book, the Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning, and she goes as far as to say, you're selfish, leaving all this clutter and all these things for your family to deal with. You know, get it organized, you know, get it down to, and you know, I think she's got 5 children, and she'd got all of her mum's stuff, her parents' stuff, her parent-in-law's stuff, and she was just like, what am I going to do with all this? And it's, you know, it is talking about, you plan a christening and you sit there going, right, what should we have? You know, where are we going to have it? You plan a wedding, you plan a party, and this is the last thing you do. This is the very last thing you do. Why would you not want to have a hand in it? Why would you not want it to be awesome?
Claire, I thank you very much for joining us today. I know we're constrained by time, because I know you've got to get off somewhere.
Sorry,
I'm keeping an eye of time for you. All right, so I missed the timekeeper today.
I tell you what, Claire, I might get you back a bit later on in the year, or maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
About sort of like more of the checklist, so that people can have a better idea of what it is, because some people, and you know, if you've not gone through the death or involved, you actually are a duck in water. You don't know what a duck out of water. You don't know what you're doing. You know, there is a process. So we might grab you back on in
definitely.
In
In fact, that is one of my first questions to a family is, have you organised a funeral before? Because that gives me a good marker of whether people are going, right, okay, I've got an idea whether they're going, help.
Yeah.
You know, gauging where they are. But yeah, definitely. I'd happily come back and talk about a checklist.
Claire, if people wanted to get hold of you now, and we can put this in the show notes, so how would they get hold of you now?
I've got a Facebook page called Claire Kehily Funeral Celebrant.
Brilliant. Okay.
And it's completely public. You can chat to me on there, look at things I put on there. Yeah, you're welcome to contact me there. Be lovely to hear from anyone.
Lovely. Claire, thanks very much for joining us today. And we will do it again. We definitely will. Yeah, definitely. There's so many questions, and I think a checklist and some more advice for people will be an amazing thing to do. I really do.
Definitely.
That'll be fantastic. Thanks for joining us today.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Claire. You take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, before we go, there's me saying, there'll be a little delay there on video. Before we go, everyone, if you're still listening and watching and haven't switched off from that mini little delay, don't forget, if you want to subscribe to us, you can find us on all podcast channels, and you can also go over to the Authentic Smile YouTube channel to see the video of it. And do you have interesting stories about your own habits or life or anything that you've experienced that you would like to share with us, and come on? So don't forget, please do always contact myself, Sue Allsworth, so that we can get you on the next episode. And so now that is definitely
goodbye. Lovely.
Goodbye, and it's goodbye from me, it's goodbye from David, and it's goodbye from take care. Bye.